it is time to kick this off. This is our last session of the day. I'm super excited about this one because as a former full-time developer, getting measured and like understanding the experience and how you can become more effective is always a challenge, right? Because we used to measure by like stupid things like how many lines of code you wrote, crap like that. But I'd like you all to help me to welcome up here for this discussion. We've got Amado Gramajo, who's a VP of Infrastructure and DevOps at Nasdaq. And we've got Johan Andersen, who's a VP of Infrastructure at Datadog. And they're going to talk about how to improve software delivery and the developer experience. So welcome them all.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I thought we would probably start a little bit by Amado and I kind of talking a little bit about what falls into scope, because I think what is infrastructure or what is part of the developer experience program varies a lot from place to place. And then maybe we'd go into some of the problems more concretely. I don't know if you want to start it or I can do mine.
Sure. So at Nasdaq, I manage several teams, infrastructure operations related teams, the DevOps engineering team, observability, infrastructure, as well as cloud operations. And in terms of development support, I would say that the DevOps engineering team is one of the more important teams that we have that help improve developer experience, because we manage the GitLab platform, which has become our standard platform for source control and also for CI/CD. And I can say, one of the reasons that we did that was to reduce a lot of the friction the developers had and streamline processes. That's still something that's in play. Like, we're still trying to migrate off legacy code repos that are out there. I saw an email last week about SVN finally being retired. I think I told you about that, and I was like, what?
We have what?
Yeah. SVN, what? I still know what a P server is, but was that SVN? I don't know. But yeah, no, I think the role of all these infrastructure teams are essentially to support our developers and remove a lot of the friction that they have around them in terms of platforms, right? Specifically with where they're actually doing the work in their pipelines. It was mentioned earlier, like measuring developers. Like, we don't measure developers. We love our developers, but cycle times is something that we as an infrastructure team we're cognizant of, because if their build times are slow, then it kind of affects everything. So we're very keen on working with our developers and helping them, modify their runners or give them more resources. So we're kind of like in the middle of everything of what they're trying to do in terms of the underlying infrastructure, most importantly.
So you said something interesting there that I wanted to kind of go into a little bit, right? Is like helping keep build times tight, helping people get their runners to a place where they're performant. How much do you guys restrict what can go in a runner? Because I think one of the things that makes developer experience hard, or at least kind of running a build fleet kind of hard, is that developers can you add tests, okay, and then you add a test that spins up an instance because you want to try running your code, and then another instance because you need a server for it to connect to, and suddenly somebody's CI step is really like a 4-hour-long multi-resource monstrosity. Like how many guardrails do you put around?
We're actually very flexible. The resource itself is the guardrail, because they'll hit the ceilings, and they'll run into a problem, and we're like, well, what are you doing? And then we see, oh, but maybe you shouldn't scale back what you're doing.
Do that.
Maybe you shouldn't do that, especially when it's on a shared runner. Right?
Yeah.
Get your own, do whatever you want, and you pay for it.
Yeah, and this idea of separating kind of the pieces, like another reason developer experience gets hard is there really kind of two real buckets of work that a lot of developer experience falls into. One is do whatever you want. I want you to develop software fast and well and get what you need. But the other is the developer tools are frequently a part where businesses that have grown large enough to have compliance requirements, this is where you have to start implementing them. Yeah. And so this is one of those things where maybe it's very fast at the beginning when a company is small to be laissez-faire, to say, yeah, if you like that, do that. It's totally fine. And then you discover after a certain point, you're being asked, do we use this library anywhere? And if you haven't done any centralization, you haven't done any kind of platformization, to steal what you were saying before, you have a world of hurt, right?
Yeah.
And this is how we are with our kind of GitLab stuff now. Is so many people have used it to do so many things that are maybe CI related, or maybe it's just that was a convenient part of the release, place to hang something in the release process. And now times are wildly unpredictable. You get noisy neighbors. It's a difficult challenge for us. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm absolutely right. One of the things we try to do is we're just starting to, because of the scale, like we're growing, you have different product teams, different capabilities within those product teams. It helps if we have like standardized templates. So now we're trying to like standardize templates so that a lot of the work isn't repeated or done differently. Again, like building a community within the developers. Like you hear DevOps, and a lot of teams have what they call DevOps people embedded folks, and usually they're looking at like the testing or creating a Jira, but not every team can have someone dedicated to that. So like even like looking at like infrastructure code, like Terraform, not every developer is going to be an expert, right? So even though we're centralized, we're not saying, we are the DevOps team and everything goes through us. We're more of enablers. So like if a developer has the capabilities and they just need help, we'll help, right? But I think it's important to have it centralized, because at least you have an area where standards are created, right? And the problems are solved in a similar way. And we also experience, we become more knowledgeable as to the problems that the developers are having, and we understand their capabilities, and it allows us to respond faster and help them.
Yeah, this is kind of more the management part than maybe the technology part, but definitely that balance between I'm here to help you, I want to help you do your thing, and I still want you to have enough knowledge to extend on what I do for you. It can be very tricky, because certainly a lot of our developer teams, none of them are here, right? There's a little bit of almost learned helplessness, where it's like, no, I'm just going to ask those guys to either to do this for me, or literally how to do it. Finding a way to kind of get that knowledge of what can be pretty specialized tools, Terraform or Bazel or some of these other things that maybe are not language native primitives that people are familiar with. How do you get people to kind of become their own domain experts and then help their own teams? Or does it all fall on the central team, and suddenly, it's a support nightmare? Our Slack channels are brutal. It's not pretty.
Yeah, a couple of things that we do at Nasdaq, again, it's improving developer productivity by continuous learning, right? We have workshops that are conducted by cloud engineering, where they'll teach Terraform. We also have the standard online training courses available. These things should help developers learn and ramp up. But oftentimes it's lack of time, right? They don't have the time to study or to practice something. So to me, it's becoming more and more critical that we start building kind of like that forum of development practices, like so that we have a community where they're actually sharing thoughts. The product teams have different goals, they have different timelines,
Sure.
And again, different languages, expertise, but I think there's a lot that they can learn together as a community around the pipeline.
Yeah, trying to teach people to learn, right? This is an uphill struggle sometimes. I think there's an interesting kind of experience that I see in the developer tools model in particular, where teams at the same time will say, listen, I don't care how you tell me to do it, just tell me what you'll support.
Yeah.
But then they'll also say, but this is terrible, I want to keep my current process, I don't want to move to your new thing. So you get a little of each, right? And I joke with my boss when he's threatening me that success in the developer tools world is frequently like, that's quiet grumbling. If the grumbling is quiet, then that's it, you've attained wild success. It's when there's more like torches and pitchforks that it gets, you've got to work on it a little.
Oh, and those happen.
Yeah, that's a sad thing, I think. I wanted to ask you about kind of we talked a little bit about the build fleet and managing that in a shared environment. And this is the equivalent of kind of just take arbitrary code you find on the internet and find ways to run it safely. It's just a really crazy problem. But I wanted to move left a little bit to the idea of source code storage. It sounded like you said you use GitLab for both of those. And in my world, we're a weird hybrid where the source code source of truth is GitHub, and then it gets exported to a GitLab that we run. Do you have the ability to kind of enforce all code lives in one place, or do you have to deal with everything everywhere?
Yeah, we have those headaches. We have, it's a struggle. Some teams will stand up their own environment, their own, like Artifactory, and we have to try to integrate. I love it because I'm not paying for it; someone else is managing it. But everything works better if we're on the same tool.
Yeah.
Right. So decisions have to be made, and strategically, if the tool is if this is the tool, then this should be the tool. But it happens with a lot of things, even with like testing, source code testing, all those tools like Prisma Cloud, and even container scanning. Anything that a tool exists that can be inserted into a pipeline, it's not going to be standard. It's a mess. It's a struggle. We still have a lot of standalone binary repos that we can't get rid of.
Yeah.
That are unsupported, but are still being used.
Yeah. Today we have a set of, I don't want to call them mono repos because we have so many of them, but let's say maybe mega repos, like big shared code places where people work together, and then a halo around them of people who are like, well, that experience is garbage. I want to have my own per project repo. And because it's easier to just always say yes to a customer, right? Like if you run an infrastructure team or a platform team, your goal is, like you said, to reduce the friction that your customers see. And very frequently that feels like saying yes to whatever your customers are asking for. And this has failed me. This doesn't work indefinitely because you end up with a plethora of kind of random garbage, and nobody's like, someone new shows up and like, well, where should I keep my code? And I'm like, well, what do you want? Do you want this? Or, so we're having this kind of, the pendulum has to start swinging back to a little bit more opinionated, a little bit more centralized stuff, and that can mean imposing change on teams. And certainly that's one of the more challenging parts of my job, is kind of figuring out how much change you can impose and how quickly.
Yeah, same. We have the same struggles, and it's very hard to get developers to change the way they work.
Yeah.
Because they're so used to it, right? Even though it's inefficient and wrong, they're so used to it. But at Nasdaq, since we are a regulated company, and we can just say, this is the new standard, and say regulatory requirement, and then all of a sudden, it's like I have to go reach out to an internal audit and say, hey, remember that time I helped you? I need your help now.
As I say, the CISO talk was the one right before this. This is the one that's
they're gone. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's the only way you can really enact change, and because they're so concerned with delivering the code. It's understandable. They're used to it. It's the process. It works. But scaling and thinking in the future, it's not going to work.
I'm trying to leaven that approach a little bit by trying to find more carrots. Like I certainly have the regulatory stick. As we start looking at answering audits or being able to respond to customer requests about like, do you use this thing that a vulnerability was just announced in? I have to be able to answer that stuff. Like we're a grown-up company now. And okay, sorry, product pitch. We use the Datadog tool suite for a lot of this, but okay, pitch over. The centralization stuff, to me, I've also been trying to find ways to make the actual experience better. So if I say things like, no, I really want you to be in these well-managed small repos, and if you do that, you don't have to deal with the 20,000 flaky tests that people have dumped in this dumping ground for the last 10 years. You can only have tests that relate to your stuff. It's been marginally successful. We're not done. No, it doesn't lead to 100% adoption. But one of the big problems we've had with kind of moving away from larger, more consolidated repos is the idea of managing like third-party dependencies. Like, do you have kind of a governance process? Can any developer go get any library from anywhere and use it? What does that look like?
No, we do have a process. We have a process around everything, even AI, as you can imagine. We have governance process around AI. So no, there is. We have audits, we have risks, we have controls. Like we have to.
We have to.
Yeah.
Like we had to just even just like if you want to take the governance out of it, but just get an inventory, right? Like we for a long time there we weren't even at the phase where it was like, no, you can't use Joe's protobuf library because we have 7 other protobuf libraries. But we wanted to at least see what people had done. And then we started kind of locking down. And one of the forcing functions that you talk about, like resources cost being a forcing function to make people do reasonable things, for us it was breaking internet access from the build and the development environment. So it no longer became you can pull anything you want from anywhere, or you can use PyPy or whatever. It became it's in our supported central repo, and our team will keep those versions up to date, or your build is broken, and that was a hard sell to kind of get to. But
yeah, we've had similar struggles. We try to be, in the beginning, a couple of years back when cloud was coming out, we try to give product development, go build, right? And of course, they went and built everything very different. And then it was like, oh no, standardize, pull in, and then it became like holy smokes, we have like all these images. Now it's time to bring it back, consolidate. We have an AMI, golden image, that's what you can use. You can't launch any other AMI. It's being forced, so it's kind of like bringing them back now. And you see it in other companies as well. The companies that have like dedicated teams that can do whatever they want, like you were mentioning, and all of a sudden now they realize that you can't scale that way. You have to have the standards. And especially if something is a vulnerability and you have different deployments everywhere, different versions of software.
Yep.
No one's keeping track of it. You have to pull it all back in. And sometimes what happens is you have that centralized team that forms to be able to manage it all.
Yeah, we definitely have some of the centralized team. The other thing that we learned after we implemented this idea of golden images is that, hey, all right, great. Here's a base layer that you can use that I promise to keep up to date for you. If you use this base layer, you will have the latest up to date everything. It'll be fantastic. And then we discovered that doing all that work means absolutely nothing if no one updates their software.
Yeah.
If you've pushed that base image from 9 months ago, it was great 9 months ago. It was fantastic. It's a little sketchy now. So we've had to kind of start evangelizing this idea of what we call a build horizon, right? Like this idea that I've got Datadog to show me the build age of every container in the fleet. If yours are older than 30 days, my project managers are going to come talk to you. And eventually we hope to get to a world where it's not every team has a monkey that turns a crank that pushes software, but it's like, here's an easy way, put your build target in this file and we build it for you every week. And then the deployment software can pick it up. You have to have good tests, but you all have good tests anyway, right?
Right.
It's all perfect, right? Testing is solved. So, but yeah, like this notion that just updating the dependencies was enough proved to be a big lie for me, because people were just not updating what they actually run at the same speed we were updating kind of the base images.
Yeah, and I like the wall of shame, like you mentioned. Your name's going on the list. Your name's going to be on that list. And it goes up to your manager, and they're going to ask questions.
Yeah, the list gets reviewed,
and you get called into a room, and you have to answer for why are you running a 10-year-old image.
And I don't even need to be like, that's 31 days. What are you doing? I'm like, this is 10,000 days.
Yeah.
Come on, get it together. And I don't know, this has been really beneficial in another way, because for a while there's a bunch of stuff that with reorgs or teams moving around, like,
yeah,
I'll ask the question, and no judgment on anyone, but do you know who owns everything that is running in production? Could you point to a team or human or person for everything? Some of you, I know that's true because you were excellent people. For a long time, we were not excellent people. But saying everything must be repushed every interval, 28 days, 30 days, 90 days, doesn't matter, but some interval really forces that stuff out of the woodwork, because you can say, who do I even nag about this? No one knows? Well, maybe we should try turning it off and seeing what happens. While everybody's here and can fix it, but it's going to break sometime, and we don't know who's responsible for it, and that sucked.
A good old pulling the plug.
Yeah, well.
Oh, what happened?
Who stuck their head up, from whose head appeared over the cube walls? Yeah.
I did that once in a data center. I pulled the plug, and like you just did, this developer came out of nowhere, and I see the head like this. And I'm like, oh.
You!
And that's what he did. He was, you! And I was like, ah!
Busted.
Oh, it was an old server.
Nobody responds to emails about this thing.
I don't even know how, he like teleported. I don't know how, like, I just pulled it. He was like,
That's pretty good. No, this interesting balance of ownership, right? Because like you say, the developers are very passionate about their tools. They're people who are working really hard, and their main goal is to deliver whatever the business objective is, right?
yeah.
So when I ask them, this is why I talk about rationing how much change you impose centrally out on the teams who are your customers, is because if you it's real easy for me to sit in my ivory tower and be like, also update this, and we're deprecating that. You have to migrate to a new thing, and I can very easily outpace all of their ability to do any work just by mandating things. And that's when you kind of get replaced as an infrastructure platform. They'll be like, I'm not going to use your stuff. It's too much of a pain. So figuring out how to budget or ration how many changes you let out into the world every quarter, every year, whatever, is an interesting challenge, at least for me.
It is a challenge. And, you always have fire alarms and all your priorities get blown to the side. And especially with technical debt and trying to clean that up, like, it's a never-ending battle. Like, I feel like, that's one of the places I think I want to focus on more. But it's difficult, again, because developers have different priorities. Not all developers are working the same. So we try to, best help at where we can with the infrastructure to alleviate some of that burden. But it's a little bit difficult. Some developers feel like they don't need help. Some are very willing to, listen, right, and use our resources like Datadog. We have Datadog come in, kind of give education on how to do something right, and they're responding to it, and they come to the conferences, and all that's it all helps improve the developer experience, which in turn improves their productivity. But it's not across the board, right? It's teams by teams, and then eventually it trickles out, and all of a sudden you have a whole new unit that's interested, and then they show up.
The other one that I've tried to do for that is to make sure I get in on the new hire pipeline. Like, if you show off what the good supported path is and say, this is how we do this at company X, and this is all the good tools, and look how nice it is, and now you report to your first assignment on the second day and you discover they use tools from the Stone Age, they're the ones who are going to be asking questions like, well, I know we have better than this. I saw it as part of new hire training. Why are we doing the rocks and sticks method of software development? So I again, a lot of change can't be centrally imposed, or I'm sorry, maybe I should say, you can't impose all change centrally. I can't, again, shake my tiny fist and mandate everyone do what I want. I want to try and win some people over and see the world really is better outside this little garden that we're in, you guys. Yeah. Can we think about doing some of this?
That's a great point.
So I think we've got something like 15 minutes left. I'm happy to throw the floor open. It's hard for me to see people, but if anyone wants to talk about or ask questions about developer experience from their point of view, or problems or priorities or stuff like that, I think we're happy to talk about some of that. Otherwise, you'll get more anecdotes. It'll be good.
Note, there we go. There are 2 mics right here in the aisle, so if you've got a question, please come up to the mics, and that way we can capture what you're asking, and these fine folks can actually hear it.
Awesome.
Don't be shy. I know you have questions.
Nope.
Oh, we got one over here.
Hey, thank you for the talk, guys. So I guess my question is, for somebody new, maybe to the field of developer experience, what are some good measurable KPIs or OKRs you could hit to focus on?
I heard lines of code submitted was really good. No,
code coverage.
Yeah.
Cycle time is for me from infrastructure. That's one of the ones that I always look at. Anything really, if you look at DORA, any of those DORA metrics, those are really good and kind of like now the standard.
It's interesting because where I am, at least, I have a set of what I'd call operational metrics. How many active users are there? How many pull requests did you do? How many builds did you do? These are things that kind of help you demonstrate why the developer experience thing is kind of continuing to scale. And it scales non-linearly, right? For every new developer you get, they contribute more code that all the other developers have to kind of build because you're building a product. So tracking some of the operational metrics can give you some heads up on when you have to start rethinking, like, this solution is running out of runway. We have to come up with a better idea. The harder part for me is kind of what you'd call like customer satisfaction metrics, right? You can only survey people so many times before they hit you with a chair. They're just not interested in clicking the yes, it was great every time. So we've had to kind of work to build the equivalent of like a customer advisory board inside the company, find the people who are passionate about either their tools or their language and get them to participate. And we've had to do we have engineering brown bags where people present cool stuff. And usually those are things like with the product that people have built, or like with the runtime environment about how you can run cool code without doing development. But it's important for developer experience teams to appear in these as well and talk about, like, again, this is the latest cool thing, you should try it, but capture questions and capture feedback from the people who are passionate about it. I don't want to sit here and tell you I've solved this problem. I haven't, but the sentiment problem is the hard one for me. The more operational metric stuff, yeah, I think there are a bunch of good ones that Amado already said.
Awesome.
Yeah, we also conduct, not as frequently as we should, kind of DevOps assessment workshops where we talk about developers give us feedback on the platform and the tool. Then we talk about like DevX and what the expectations are, and what they want to change. And then we usually end talking about like their wants. Like IDP is one of the biggest asks that we have from our developers. So it's a good way to see which developers are active and have ideas that we can start partnering with to improve the platform, and also see which are the business units of the teams that are doing the most work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask if you had any opinions on like the single pane of glass tools and that trend, like Backstage or
like Datadog, because
yeah.
I'm very pro single pane of glass. Like a lot of my problems come from, like I talked about, the variability in the environment. Lots of people using different tools. I have to deal with acquisitions who brought their own code bases and their own SDLC with them, or teams that grew up as a Java shop and now have to kind of integrate more in our less Java environment. And so we tend to, in my place, use Datadog as the single pane of glass and the CI app that goes with it. I get a lot of pushback about the idea of, hey, why don't I go out and buy a product like this from another vendor? But I feel like my experience may not be typical, so I'll defer to you.
We have many panes of glass, too many, but we are looking to consolidate, leveraging Datadog as well for a single dashboard. When it comes to the pipeline and delivery and measuring the health of GitLab and the pipes, because it's too, we don't even, like, we have Splunk, we have too many. It is definitely a problem for us.
Well, and when you talk about, like you talked about cycle time or delivery time, right? To me, that means time from when you've committed a change to its running in production, and or at least has started to run in production. Because in our world at least, we have had to impose pretty strict standards. There's no, I updated the code and it's globally live, guys. Was that good? No, that was not good. Don't do that. So that means, though, instrumenting a lot of different systems, right? We have a deployment system. We have the Kubernetes control plane that's doing the rollouts. We have GitLab, which was doing the building. And we have GitHub, where the commit landed. So I've had to kind of try and single pane of glass some of that to even get close to a deploy time, like a real cycle time metric. And having a common place for that to work, or to get those numbers, feels really essential if you even want to get that really basic number. How long between when you committed it did it take till it ran?
Great, thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I was curious if your developers have access to AI tools, like if they use ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot, because one of the things you mentioned was like developers sometimes don't know everything. So for example, I'm not a Terraform expert, but I can ask a prompt and say, hey, can you write me Terraform code to spit out resource XYZ, and that helps reduce some of the friction of having to go to my infra
Sure.
all the time. So I was curious your experiences there.
So for a long time, we had no rules at all, right? So obviously, yes, we had people using ChatGPT for everything. And we did a bit of a pilot to like just, again, sentiment analysis. What do people think? Do we want to try it? We did try it for a single group, but we wanted to get one of the commercial offerings for this because we were really wary about those companies training their own models on our code. I don't know if anybody saw like the Reddit type stories about it auto-completing comments with the names of developers from inside of GitHub. And we're like, I really don't want any of that stuff kind of. I do not want a news article about some kind of Datadog internal thing appearing in someone else's model. So we signed up with the commercial stuff to use some of the AI tools for this. There was not a keen, somebody asked about KPIs a second ago. I don't have a KPI that I can point to that shows that this was better, but in the customer satisfaction stuff, the people who like it really like it. And so we added that. I don't know if you had a different experience.
Yeah, we were using it, not at scale, but then as soon as it started picking up, we formed a committee, AI governance committee. So we put structure around it and we reviewed the different products. And what we'll do is if there's interest in a new product, we'll conduct a POC. If it passes the criteria, then we'll make it available to users. They have to sign up though, and go through training before they can use the model. So it's a bit structured, but it's not it's not a difficult assessment to get through.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. In terms of developer experience and observability, so we put in place a few months ago an observability platform, Datadog. We got a lot of love and traction from developers, and they start to put and set up custom metrics and other features like this. And as we may know, like custom metrics are quite expensive when you don't manage them correctly. And so my question is, in terms of budget, like on observability, to satisfy developer experience, like what would you suggest, like in terms of budget, maybe a ratio between cost of your cloud environment or another metric that you would suggest here?
So do you want to go?
Yeah, I would say just.
I don't pay for Datadog, so for me.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
You don't?
Why do you think I'm the largest Datadog user in the world?
It's really just 10x whatever you're thinking. That's it. There's no formula. There's no way to do it. You just have to make sure you forecast and also speak to your salespeople because they can construct the contracts where you draw down and get for certain services you get better pricing if you're going to use those more frequently.
So I was kind of being facile there when I say I don't pay for Datadog. I don't pay a contract for Datadog, but I'm also the guy who operates the hardware that services this stuff. And so I can see when usage has grown without bounds and it's very tricky. So getting some observability, which Datadog has added about like where tags are coming from, like the cardinality of your metrics, like this is stuff that we can provide some visibility to you on. The other difficult part about, like I wanted to push this as far left as possible. Like if you're submitting code that logs a metric in it that has a tag that's the IP address of the customer, this is going to result in a really bad time for you. You don't want to do this. But some of this stuff is very hard to detect early on because the cost from Datadog is dramatically different if you run one copy of a thing or if you deploy it 10,000 times to all of the data centers that you run in. So some of this you can only detect after the fact that you've rolled it out, and keeping an eye on your daily spend and broken down by whatever tags you use to kind of indicate origin can really be helpful here. And without having that baseline of like what is useful, it's difficult to forward project a real budget, right? So I think what you're thinking of is what a lot of the other customers I've talked to think of is if you say, my overall spend for infra or for cloud is X dollars. If I'm spending more than, I think our salespeople are here. So I'll say if you're spending more than 10% of that on observability, then maybe you've got a problem. Adjust that integer to a value you feel sane with. But I do think it's sane to think about it in terms of a fraction of what your spend in running the infrastructure is.
Thank you.
I would say work closely with your sales rep though, because they can.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Tell them what you're trying to do, and they absolutely help you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, that got me thinking about something. Don't know if you covered this, but how do you make the case to business or to finance that this is worth investing in, and this is worth that? Maybe it's 10% of whatever the budget.
Yeah, that's where the developers would come in, right? Because their job is to create the code and to deliver the software. And if this helps them, it's very easy to put the business case, because usually when you have code, it's related to a product. The product should be revenue generating, and you can just piggyback off of that.
I would also come at it from one of the other hats that I wear at Datadog, which is around kind of reliability engineering. When you talk about, if you have a collection of postmortems that you've written for the last year, and you can see how many minutes did it take us to figure out that X was wrong? Why did we roll this out globally when we could have seen it after the first kind of node that you changed? A lot of outage data can be useful to make the case that greater observability would have prevented either the severity of the outage from growing, or the amount of time that downtime happened, or in other ways kind of mitigated the impact of either technology mistake, operator error, or anything like that. We make the arguments that yes, if you saved 2% of your cloud budget, but then you ate a 6-hour outage that maybe was avoidable, have you really saved money? Is this really better? Again, I'm on the engineering side of Datadog. I'm not on the sales side, so I won't say that no amount is too much to spend for observability. Like, clearly there's a budget that is tenable, but if the budget is like, we can't run basic tools because people think they're wasteful, to me that means you're going to eat a lot more downtime than you would otherwise have to.
Cool, thanks.
All right, you guys. Well, we have 3 whole minutes to spare, so I'm going to sing a song. No, Amado, I guess I just want to thank you very much for your time today. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and I want to thank all of you guys for coming and listening to us. I'm going to be hanging around for a little while after the thing if anyone wants to talk. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you for your insights.